Welcome to the Motion Church podcast, your weekly dose of teaching, faith, and inspiration. Every Sunday, we delve into the Bible to uncover its relevance for our lives today. Whether you're on the train, cooking, or just relaxing at home, grab your Bible, your coffee, or whatever you need, and let's explore the depths of living life with God together.
So, in this theme, we're talking about faith essentials. And I want to actually start with a kind of like a thought exercise with you. So, maybe you can picture a man or a woman in your life with great faith. So, who is a man or woman in your life where you say, oh, that's a man or woman of faith? And you can score some points by saying Pastor Martin, Pastor Ankie, but you can also be, so somebody has like maybe an auntie or an uncle or a grandma, grandfather. You've got somebody in your mind. You don't have to call out names here this morning. That's fine. So my question now is, okay, on what characteristics do you base that, like that idea of? So what do you see in that person that you know? Why is this person a person of great faith? It's interesting, that question. Because when I did this exercise with myself, I thought, okay, people of great faith, they are people that are firm, that are, like they are unwavering, they are maybe have great vision. But faith is so much more. And I believe that sometimes we capture faith so one-dimensional, whereas faith has many layers. And so one of the layers I want to talk to you about this morning is trusting God. Trusting God. And it's interesting because sometimes I think we can say, I have faith in God. I have faith for this. But do we really trust God? Is there a trust level involved? And thinking about it is interesting because in my view, trusting God is a part of having faith. So if you say, I have faith for a situation or faith today or faith for whatever you're going through, it also means, you have to trust God. So why is it that sometimes trusting God is more difficult than just saying, I have faith? And I do believe that it has to do with faith is sometimes more a communal thing. Like, for instance, we can have faith for motion. Faith for this English service, that it will double. Because it's a faith we share, and I feel the faith in you and me. But if I have to say, well, I trust God with my own situation, trust is based on your personal relationship with God. So do you trust God with your own situation? You can't say, well, because my wife trusts God on our situation, I have the same trust. We can share the faith, but we can't share the trust. So trust is something very personal, and it also requires us to really know God, because if you trust a person, you need to know that person very well. So this morning we're going to talk about trusting God, and I want to, start with a Bible verse of probably the biggest person of faith. And if I say, who's the father of faith? You say, Abraham. Thank you. We have some people awake here. I heard Jesus as well, which is probably also a good answer. There's many good answers, but let's. Yeah. All right. So I want to read from Genesis 22, and so you have to think about Abraham as a person who already encountered God 4 times, which is quite spectacular. This is probably a person that has a bit more trust relationship with God than I would have. With his encounters with God. So when chapter 22 comes in, you can read with me from verse 1. It says, after these things, God tested God and said to him, Abraham. Now let's pause here. After these things, God tested God. So God is testing. This is interesting because I think in our, worldview now of God, we wouldn't say, oh, loving God is a testing God, right? Why would God test me? But God is testing Abraham. So maybe God is testing you. I'm just, posing the question. I don't know. But I do believe that God is testing for a reason, it's actually, and as you know, James says as well, be thankful if you're tested by God. But he says, God tested Abraham, and Abraham said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, just to empower that a bit further, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. I mean, this is crazy, think about this, what loving God would actually put such a test. I mean, if you do a test, do a simple test, but this is actually going to the extreme. This is God saying to Abraham 4 times personally, you'll have a son, you'll have a family. And the first thing that God tests Abraham on is burning, offering your son. But so Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young son, to the young man, "Stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you." And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father, which I think is a very good question. "My father." "Here I am, my son." He said, "Behold, the fire and wood. Behold, the fire and wood we have. But where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "God will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So they went both of them together. Which is, you can say Abraham was lying. Just say it bluntly. There's probably some parents that say, always be honest to your kids. So if God tells you, that's the burnt offering, it's your son. Your son asks, where's the burnt offering? The honest parenting advice would be, just tell him the truth. But Abraham didn't say that. He said, God will provide, which is, I think, also showing the trust. Saying, okay, there's something in here. I know God, I know my father, I know this person who's asking this. So when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar, on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And we know if there's a calling, and your name is mentioned twice, it's a strong, this is almost like you could see God and the angel sitting on the trenches, waiting for this moment and no, he's not going to do it. And calling out on that moment. And he said, "Here I am." And they said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, to me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked. And behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." So, 14 sentences of this crazy story. I'm a father, this is probably the worst nightmare if God would test me like this. And still, the big question is, of course, why is God doing this? Why is God testing him? And why is God testing him with the most important thing of Abraham? And interesting thing about God testing us is, I think, one of the lessons we learn is God would not test you with something that he didn't go through himself. Sacrificing his son, is not something that God doesn't know what it is. God knows what it is. So whatever test you feel, big or small, God puts on you, it's not that God can say, "I've never done this," or "I haven't felt that," or "I haven't gone through that." He knows. And I also believe that God would never test you with something that you're incapable of handling, like testing something that will kill you or testing something that's too big. But in this case, I really believe, if I think about Abraham's position, and you think about you're 100 years old, and your whole life you wanted a son, and now you have a son, and the son can become so important. And we do know now that God called Abraham for much more than only, he has a son. And I don't know, but that this test was also something about God saying, the most important thing, can you give it away? Your most important thing right now. So, for you this morning, what's your most important thing? So when I think about trusting God, I basically summarize it in 3 challenges, which I see that Abraham all got. I put them on the screen as all 3. I know normal preaching method would be have 3 points, and spread them out over your whole preach. But this is it. So after this, if you want to doze off, that's the summary. So the 3 challenges I think that Abraham, question was, can I trust God with my most important thing? Can I trust God as if there are no alternatives? What I find fascinating is that Abraham was one of the richest person of his time. So if I would actually got the question from God to go up to the mountain, I'll probably pack my bags a bit more. I mean, I have the stuff. A nice lamb barbecue package, as an alternative for the offering. Have some food, and say, God, no, I trust you. I know what you said, but there's an alternative in my life, I'm rich, I can actually afford also, if this doesn't work out, I have it in my own hands. Which is very common for us today, right? How many alternatives do we have? So the question of the challenge is not, there are no alternatives, but can you trust God as if there are no alternatives? And can I trust God with my future? Because that's really what this was about. It was Abraham's lifeblood, his future. So those 3 challenges I think are very, very personal. And I can vouch for it in a small way. So I'm almost 10 years married, right? so it's good to have your wife on the front seat. So we have a daughter of 1 year old. She's now sleeping she is sleeping through my sermon, which is probably what you can say. The first sermon Dad did, I slept through. But she's sleeping in the baby room. And but for us, it was a big challenge to get kids as well. So in a way, I can vouch with Abraham, but not as far as he goes. But for 5 years, there was no result. And we didn't know what it was. We went through all the infertility options, basically. So if you're not known what it is, you start doing some tests. Okay, I'm okay, Deborah's okay. We did, and the tests for the wife are actually much more complex than for me. And then after, I think 4 years, which is basically 40 cycles, you start basically going deeper. And you think about 40 cycles, but there's 40 cycles of disappointment, building yourself up, getting ready for the next month, go pray, disappointment. So I would say that for my wife, and also for maybe if you know somebody who went through, probably the emotional curve is like this, especially for the wife. For the man, it's more like this. Slowly, I got more depressed, I got down. And in the beginning, I was full of hope and full of faith, like, again, having faith. Yes, I can trust God. So after 4 years, we started with treatments, IUI, IVF. And so we had a full failed IVF, which is very uncommon. That happens once in the 2 years in the hospital where we went. So basically 2 healthy people, nothing wrong. IVF is basically putting, as you know, an eggs and sperm together. Doctors have a coffee for 3 days and just check out what's happening. And nothing happened. So we thought, okay, this is it. So probably the lowest point of our lives. So there was one more option, which is called ICSI, which is where they put 1 sperm and 1 egg together. And that's kind of like what they do. And they did it for 3 options with us. And we had 1 result. So one, it was enough. And so at that point, we felt hope. There was something, And so this is our daughter, Evelyn. So we're very, very thankful. And it's very emotional to talk about it. Maybe you know somebody that goes through this, or you yourself. I mean, feel free to connect them to us. We're very open about it. But I know how tough it is, to wait and still, be in that pause moment. But I had to think about in this preach, in the preparation of one moment, which was after 4 years. I have a picture, actually. You can see, this is my Instagram post, which this is 4 years ago. I just hit my 3 likes of my mom and my dad and myself, but just for privacy reasons. But this was actually in Monte Isola. So if you know Italy, Lago Isola, which is a very beautiful lake, has in the middle of the lake has an island, which is a mountain of basically 400 meters high. So when we go on holidays, I don't know how you go on holidays, but when we go on holidays, basically my question is always every day, what are we going to do? Deborah's question is, can I please just, hang out here, read a book, and do nothing? So we're always in this sort of fun battle of, okay, one day we do something. So I already basically stand-up paddle twice to this island because I have to do something. I'm that kind of guy. So I thought, okay, let's climb the hill on the mountain. And from a distance, it looked like the hill had a castle, which I thought, okay, let's do that. So we did it. We didn't take a sub, but we took a boat to the island, and then we climbed. I think we got lost straight away on the first path, but I remember that on the footpath. But we got there, and it was a very emotional time because we were still in that process of grieving of like 40 times no success. And so coming to the top of the hill, we realized actually there was no castle. It was a church on top, which was so interesting because it felt like God was saying in that moment, like, okay, you're trying, Hylke, to climb up to a hill, and you're looking for something strong, something powerful, something like a castle, something maybe that gives you protection in this tough time. But what I'm doing is I'm actually showing you there's a church, which stands for surrender, for, hey, you can't do it. You don't have to do it. You can just give it up. So you can see I actually wrote about it. I don't Instagram much, but this was actually something very, very profound for me. And I realized, like when it comes to trusting God, that was one of those moments where you realize trusting God was difficult. I can't say I would do what Abraham did, but God asked me, can you trust me? Can you surrender? Can you not try to do it on your own? So can you trust God with my most important thing, which was, of course, at that time getting pregnant? Can I trust God as if there's no alternatives, which is, there wasn't, there was only one way. And can I trust God, with my future there? So this was, for me, a very profound moment. And I don't know how about you, but there must be maybe the one thing, like what's your one thing that you want to trust God in, which is so difficult? And so what are the steps that you can take, of trusting God? Because you realize now that trusting God is not just, we have corporate faith, I'm in motion, I trust God. Trusting God is a very personal step. It's climbing that mountain yourself, realizing when you meet God on top, what he asks of you is, can you surrender? Can you bow down? Not live on your own strength, because trusting God is basically saying, there's no alternatives, there's no option. So I want to talk about a very interesting family story. I want to talk about the grandson of Abraham. So Abraham, of course, had Isaac, and Isaac had two sons, twins, Jacob and Esau. If you know the story, I won't read the whole story to you, but let me paraphrase it, because it's an interesting family story also about trusting God. Because Jacob was born as the second, Esau came out first. Jacob tried, like he held on to Esau when they were getting born. But Jacob grew up knowing his Grandpa Abraham, because we can imagine Grandpa Abraham was still alive. Knowing the culture of that time, you can imagine they all lived as family together. So I don't know if he spoke daily with Grandpa Abraham or weekly, but there was a relationship. So he had his father, he has a grandpa. And I can just imagine, his father telling bedtime stories about, hey, Grandpa and Dad went up to the mountain, and there was no lamp, which is a bit of a cruel bedtime story, but I can, probably with some jokes and everything, but they talked about it, because Abraham passed away when Jacob was in his teenage years, so when he was young. So I can also imagine then, of course, his father was getting blind, getting also old. Abraham died. So his father thought, okay, I need to give that blessing, which we all talk about. The blessing was probably something we talk about every time, because Abraham was blessed. So Jacob knew about this blessing, from first hand, from talking to Grandpa, and also talking to Dad, because for Dad, the blessing was very important. So when Dad was ready to bless, of course, his oldest son, which was Esau, as you know the story, maybe, Jacob pretended he was Esau, put on, some hairy arms, put on some hairy arms, put on some clothes. Dad was very weak, was blind, came in the dark, and basically Dad blessed Jacob and not Esau. So what happened then? Probably one of the biggest family dramas of that time, because Jacob had to flee. He was actually chased for his life by his brother. He would never see his dad again, the dad who actually he received a blessing from. And the one person that loved him, his mom, he would never see. So, good choice, Jacob, getting the blessing. Like the whole family was ripped apart. Dad would die, mom was alone, and your brother is basically chasing you. So, it's a it's a very profound story. And then what happened is he basically came to a place called Bethel, which is, this is all, if you want to read through it, Genesis 25. And in Genesis 28, Jacob came to Bethel. And Bethel was a place where God, for the first time, showed himself to Jacob. And he saw this staircase up and down. He saw angels coming up and down, and he got a vision of, hey, you're beloved, you're my son, I have a vision for you and your family. And I would actually call this Bethel moment more like what we would have as a church conference, because Jacob was on his high there, he basically said straight away, I will pledge every 10th of my money, for you, God, because I'm here. And I don't know what your relationship with church conference, because I love them, but sometimes it can feel like you're on this high after a church conference or a weekend, and then a week later, it's Monday, you go to work, and everything feels like back to normal. It's not there anymore. So it's not that basically this Bethel moment really changed Jacob there, because he came to Laban, to his family member, and he was the old Jacob himself, afraid of his brother, longing for something that could actually hold him. So what happened was he came to Uncle Laban, family members, and he saw one of the daughters of Laban, her name was Rachel. And Rachel was a pretty girl, lovely girl. And here was Jacob, probably a very empty soul. Everything he wanted, the blessing, the love of his father, he didn't get. His father was angry, brother was angry, mom he would never see again. So I would say here is a desperate, single, lonely man. And these are dangerous targets in this world. We know this. And so he sees this beautiful Rachel, and he thinks, oh, a pretty girl. That will probably fix all my problems. If I married a pretty girl, then whatever happened, even my Bethel moment, my weekend, I'm forgetting about what God can do. I'm going to fix it myself. And so he speaks to Rachel's dad, Laban, and he goes like, can I marry her? Can I marry her? And Laban asks, what do you want to give? Because in that time, again, we're living in different times, but it was common as a family, of course, of the man to give a present. And as you know, his family was out of the picture, so he had to work for it. Wasn't that his father could actually come in and give some money. So he said, I'll work 7 years. And it sounds very bizarre, but 7 years was a lot of money. The average, basically, sum of money for a wedding was about 3 years of wages. So when Jacob says, I want to work 7 years, Laban thinks, here's a man desperately in love. He's crazy. You're going to work 7 years? So he's a smart guy, Laban, because he has also his own issues. And he thinks, okay, what's happening here with the 7 years? So, okay, Jacob works 7 years. And what happens is, the wedding is prepared. Everything happens. In that time, obviously, a lot of alcohol probably. You can imagine. There's no Philips Hue lights, in the middle of the tent, to see. So Jacob lays down after the wedding day, or after the wedding days. And basically, he in the next morning, he finds out it's not Rachel, but it's the twin sister, Leah. Leah comes in the picture. So what's happening here? Because Leah is the oldest and Rachel is the youngest. And so Laban had a problem as well. Laban's problem, his issue, was, okay, I have 2 daughters, and the crazy Jacob is getting in love with my youngest. But it's actually not common. I want to actually marry out my oldest one first. So Jacob is furious. And so let me read a few sentences here about this. So in verse 25, Jacob says, did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And I believe in that moment when he said it, it was like a flashback. He was deceived. He was deceived in the middle of the night, when you couldn't see, in the darkness, by pretending somebody else was actually that person. And he was actually angry at Laban about this moment. And while he was angry, I believe, he felt like in his own heart, but that was me. I was that other person. I deceived somebody. And now I get deceived. And Laban, the smart father, he says in verse 26, it's not done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. I mean, think about this sentence. It's not done in our country. Maybe it's done in your country, where you are the younger before the oldest. It's not done in our country to put the younger before the firstborn. Laban knows exactly what Jacob did, He's actually putting this as a sentence, to mess with him. So after this, Jacob goes, okay, I'll work another 7 years. I'll marry Rachel. So 2 wives. I'm not going to go in detail about it, but again, common in the culture. But you can see here's a whole big family situation of all people with pain. You got the pain of Laban, like about, okay, I have 2 daughters. You got the pain of Jacob, thinking, I want the pretty girl. Actually, it's interesting because it says in verse 21 of Genesis 29, it says actually, after the 7 years of working, Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I might go into her, for my time is completed. I'll just say this in our language. Give me my wife because I want to have sex with her. That's what he's saying, he is so fixated on, because that will fix my issue, Actually, I read in the commentaries that the Hebrews had a big trouble with this sentence, because it's so out there. You can't basically make the language nicer than it is. It's basically what he's exactly saying, this is what I want, So here's a very unhealthy person with a lot of family trauma that's trying to fix his own problems. And God told him, you can rely on me, you can trust me. But as a normal human being, like you and me, we're fixing our own problems. In my opinion, this is a very cultural now story. Any movie is about these kind of stories. People that want to fix their own issues. But now here comes Leah. And I want to end with Leah because I like Leah. I really like her. So there's not a lot that the Bible talks about her. It did say, okay, she is maybe the less pretty one. But you can imagine how she grows up. She grows up in the shelter of her younger sister, the pretty one. And here's Leah, also having a life, having dreams, having ambitions. The external guy comes in, of course, wants her younger sister. And then dad has to help. Dad has to help. She has to sneak in, I don't know if it was her choice at all. Jacob gets angry because Jacob still wants, the younger person. And Leah is stuck. She is really stuck. I can't even fathom how it would be in her situation to be stuck in a marriage where, you have a husband who doesn't really care about you. You can't go anywhere. So Leah gets children, and you might know the names. These are the 12 sons, or a few of the 12 sons of Jacob. And so from verse 32 to 35, it talks about the children she got. And the first one is Reuben. And the meaning of Reuben means seeing. Because Leah said, if I just got a son, maybe my husband will see me. I want to be seen, So by maybe bearing children, this will grab the attention. This will actually fill my void, my pain. So Reuben means seeing. The second one, because this didn't happen, was Simeon. Simeon means hearing. If I get my second son, I've got 2 sons, maybe my husband will now hear me, will see me, will hear me. The third son is Levi, and Levi means binding or connecting. So if I have Levi, maybe my husband will be connected to me, see me, don't leave me alone. And then something unusual happens. And we don't know what it is. But something happens between the third son and the fourth son, which the Bible doesn't describe. What the Bible does say is the fourth son, and I'll read it to you. It's a different story. She conceived again in verse 35 and bore a son and said, this time, I will praise the Lord. And therefore she called him Judah. And Judah means praise. So what happened between Levi and Judah? I don't know. I'll ask her, hopefully later. I want to know. But she had an encounter. Something happens where she said, okay, from this moment on, I'm going to stop doing it myself. Hearing, seeing, connecting, I don't want to do that. I will praise God. Praise is first. I will surrender. I'll just give it up. So there's praise, which is a fascinating story. And then it says in the Bible, then God closed her womb. This is it. How amazing. And Judah, as you know, is the forefather of Jesus. This one step she did, out of her line. I mean, Leah is the grandmother of Jesus, far away. And through the line of Judah, which means praise, the whole line shifted. Through something that she did, she felt, maybe she got cold, maybe she heard an angel, I don't know what happened. But there's a moment when she said, okay, now I stop doing it on my own strength, I'm going to trust God. Leah trusted God with the most important thing. She trusted God like there's no alternative. There was none. She was stuck. And Leah trusted God with her future. The future which was ultimately our future of our Savior.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Motion Church podcast. We hope that today's message has encouraged and inspired you. Much of our content is free thanks to the people who support us financially. If you would like to contribute, go to motion.church. For more, visit our website and follow us on social media for the latest updates. Until next time,